you're looking at like all those 18-year-olds doing all this crazy stuff. I'm looking at you in your late 20s with an awesome podcast and everything going for you. And I'm like, I didn't have my shit together in my late 20s.
But you do now, so
yeah, but there are people in their 50s that are looking at me going, wow.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Thank you for having me.
By the way, we were talking about the hat before we started the show. I love the hat. It's very marketing driven.
It is. It is. You gotta be representing as a marketer, and you also have to be a poser. I don't even surf, but I just love the hat. And this is it was just a really cool surf shop in Encinitas that reminds me of my time there.
So to start off the show, I've heard on other podcasts that your parents, your mom is like very artistic, and then your dad is very logic driven. And growing up in Boston, curious about what were some of the past when you're younger, is there any experiences that kind of drive into what you do today?
Yeah. So you obviously have listened to some past podcasts where I talked about my mom being an artist and my dad being kind of a logical mechanic, business owner. I definitely always loved art, whether it was sketching or painting or printmaking, you name it, I was doing it. And my favorite thing to do was trying to capture a face or a human moment of expression, if you will, as accurately as I could. I mean, I would just sit there and just like sketch someone's face until I'd show it to someone. I'd be like, do you recognize that person? But on the other side, and that's a very technical skill. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, I also like doodling. I'm just like, my mind still wanders. I will doodle on conference calls, mm-hmm. and it just kind of keeps me engaged while my mind kind of goes into a different direction. But honestly, even my doodles need some symmetry. And I'm always trying to make sense, even if it's abstract. So I guess my brain, while it's creative, is always searching for order. And I'm driven by that. There's a constant need to make sense of white space and ambiguous situations. And ultimately, my job has taken that form too. I mean, when you become a leader, whether you're at a startup or a big company, your job, in my mind at least, is to help other people through pretty shapeless, ambiguous white space situations and help them make sense of it. And there's so many examples of that at technology companies where we're constantly innovating and looking for product market fit and trying to figure out who our customers are. And there's an art to that, but as you start to see patterns, you build systems around that. And whether it's the art or science in my childhood, it's all kind of come together in really what I love about not just marketing, but in working in business.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you that business is kind of like some sort of art too. So you have to create on the way and then being creative in like all the business strategies as well. Curious, what do you see as a skill that you're constantly trying to improve at to advance your career?
Well, so that journey never stops. Even after a couple of decades of doing this, I still feel pretty deficient in many areas. But I hire I hire really good people. And, I'd say the one thing that I'm probably focused on right now is really about telling a good story, building a brand, changing consumer minds. It sounds easier. Maybe it doesn't sound easy, but it sounds easy at the outset. But mental models, consumer mental models are really difficult to shift. Once a consumer has made their mind up about how they spend their days or what they think about a brand, that's really hard to change. So what I'm really keen to get better at right now is finding ways to work with my product counterparts to adopt customer experiences to suit the needs of consumers. The best brands do this exceptionally well, whether it's Apple or Spotify or Airbnb. They just, it wasn't easy, but they built a seamless experience. No matter, you could be talking to a genius at a Genius Bar, or you call customer service or at Apple, or you open that box, and it just whoosh, and you got that new iPhone, and it smells great. It's just, that is every bit of that experience is perfectly designed and captured, but it's not by mistake, right? That's a very deliberate thing.
Yeah.
So we're actually working really hard at Yelp on our first big consumer brand initiative right now, to launch this summer. And I'm just excited to get in the weeds on brand positioning and storytelling and really integrated campaign design,
Hmm.
which isn't a muscle that I think we have, or it's been many years since we've done it. Um, so it's definitely a skill that I'm, relearning, because I haven't done it in a few years as well.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I feel like designing the whole experience is super important. And curious about like speaking of I guess like collaborating with your counterpart in products and everything. So one thing is I feel like Yop is it's already like a really popular brand, right? So people already have the brand image in their head. What can be done, I guess, like to go deeper on that experience? Because I personally, when I'm like searching for food, even nowadays, like
Yeah.
I'm sitting at home, I'm like searching for food. I mean, I trust Yelp reviews more because I feel like it's like actually reviewed by foodies or like people that are actually like to
Mhm.
eat than just, oh, what is like the best location or like the decoration is good. So like I guess it ranks better on Google or something. But
Mhm.
curious about how do you kind of like change the brand image or like maybe like make it even more effective in the consumer's head? Like what would that goal be?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just stated it well, whether intentionally or not. You said you trust Yelp more for as a foodie specifically,
Mhm.
and I
Yeah.
and I and I think that's, regardless of what I want consumers to think, they're gonna connect with some attribute,
Mhm.
and for us, we have really great content, and we've had a very active community of consumers for 15 years now, contributing really great content that helps other
Mhm.
people. And they're not doing it because, people on Yelp don't contribute content because they want to be influencers or, YouTube
Mhm.
stars, or, using filters on Instagram to show how, good they are at photography or having the best time ever. It's
Mhm.
really to help other people. And that inherently means they're going to tell the truth. And
Mhm.
like it or not, you're going to get no filter when you go to Yelp. And I think that if I can build on that as a core attribute, we can accomplish anything, because I think that is a very sustaining value proposition. And whether you apply that to restaurants, or, what to look for when you're choosing a plumber,
Mhm.
or where to get a haircut, you want to trust. And frankly, COVID, as much as we all hate it and just can't wait to get back to normal,
Mhm.
Yelp has proven to be an even bigger utility right now, because what's more important than trusting what you read about
Mhm.
whether a business is still open, or,
Mhm.
there's proper social distancing measures at the wherever that you're going, or health and safety is a top concern, or motivator for that business. And so I think there's a lot for us to capitalize on right now.
Mhm.
And I think that our value as a company is only getting stronger. And I know you didn't ask for an advertisement for Yelp just now, but it's where my mind goes. And I'm proud of the service that we offer, but I'm also excited about bringing that attribute to other places.
Yeah, that's such an interesting goal to have because, like you said, I feel like the no filter feature is super important now because people don't really know what they could trust. And like, I feel like Yap definitely built, I guess, a really strong brand when it comes to food or like any sort of like, I guess, like a local services type services. Yeah. Whenever like I go to a different places, I definitely check Yelp first to see what's around me. But let's go back to your personal career journey. So you are very successful now, like as a SVP of Yelp. So like I assume you probably built a lot of really meaningful relationships with colleagues or like peers or like mentors. um who do you think is on your personal board of advisors when it comes to career choices? Like who do you kind of talk to and bounce off ideas with?
Honestly, I've never thought about it very formally. I have friends and colleagues who are experts in something, and I ask them questions. It could be someone in marketing, or product, or finance, or even like my wife or kids, who just make me see the world differently
Mhm.
and ask me questions that often, because they know me better than anybody. And so I want to have questions and mentors in the business, but those people don't really know me, so I tend
Mhm.
to rely on personal relationships as well. Early on in my career, I did have some people that I looked up to and learned specific skills. And I
Mhm.
can call them out specifically. It wouldn't be that meaningful to say them by name on the podcast, but it was, a boss, my first boss,
Mhm.
really taught me the value of speaking clearly and loudly and convincingly in presentations. And it
Mhm.
was just one of those early skills that I just admired
Mhm.
every time I remember the first client meeting, it was at an agency, and the first client meeting, I was a pretty quiet guy, pretty introverted. And he just owned the room.
Mhm.
And what I realized is I went to then the second meeting and the third meeting and the fourth meeting, he had the same exact delivery. And he had clearly practiced. And these things don't happen by accident. Everything is learned and practiced. And sure, you have some natural skills, but in business, you have to really hone them to be excellent.
Mhm.
So for me, it was never about a single person I wanted to emulate, but really a number of people, each of whom I learned a key skill from. Um, Presenting was that first one,
Mhm.
leading, analyzing, writing. It's almost like a series of professors at a school. You want to surround yourself with people with different skills and pick and choose based on things you want to learn. You probably won't find one person who's going to teach you everything because everybody's different, and
Mhm.
you have different strengths and weaknesses, and you need to apply that in who you choose as your mentors or just people that you talk to.
Absolutely. Do you personally like have an idea of like, you want to build some sort of relationship with people with the skills, or like do you kind of like strategically doing that, or do you think you just meet whoever and then just learn from whoever that's like around you?
I tend to meet people by happy coincidence, if you believe in coincidences, or maybe things are just
Mhm.
meant to be. After reading the Celestine Prophecy when I was a kid, I suppose I never really I'm now convinced there are no convinced coincidences, but I tend to fall into relationships. Like I'll just be in a conversation with somebody. I make it a point to talk to everybody, right? I
Mhm.
mean, we met because we just we started talking, and we met because I did another podcast, and that's because I started talking to somebody. And um, I think that if you put yourself out there,
Mhm.
you'll find those connection points, and you'll realize that someone has something that you want to learn from. And
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what skill it is. Some people are more scientific about it, right? They'll say, I need to learn this skill and I want to meet someone who does this. That's just never worked for me. I've taken classes and I've done some self-learning that helped me in those regards. But when it comes to meeting people, there's something else that has to be there besides the skill. There has to be a human connection. And
Mhm.
you can't really, you can't be too scientific about that. You just have to connect with someone. And then below the surface, you'll probably find that they have experiences that you can really benefit from, even if it's not on their resume.
Mhm.
And every friend of mine and every family member teaches me something new. It's just how I live my life. I think that's how most people who, really adopt learning as like a number one motivator in life are. It's just
Mhm.
every experience is a learning opportunity, whether you know it's a learning opportunity or not. It just happens, and you have to embrace that.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. I personally also believe in like kind of the serendipity, like even, even how hard I try to like achieve a certain goal or whatever, but I feel like there's always some sort of like unknown to it. Like I feel like, people show up in your life for a reason, so I definitely feel like you can learn from different people for different things.
That's right. I mean, to be honest, like I remember, I'm recalling an incident when I was an instance, not an incident. It was earlier in my career, and I was working at an agency, and I was thinking about whether or not I should go to Capital One, which was the one of our largest clients. And I'd always thought maybe I wanted to go to a bigger company and really get deep on a product and deep on a
Mhm.
project, as opposed to being at an agency working with a lot of clients. And I couldn't decide. And I had an opportunity at Capital One, but it would have required me to move to Knoxville, Tennessee, which is kind of out of my comfort zone. And I had my wife was pregnant, and it was a big move. We were living in Boston at the time, and I remember sitting by the pool at this resort in the Caribbean, and I was reading a book that I remember. It was a business book. I can't remember who it was by, but I remember like reading it because I wanted to like look for something that would help me in my journey. And it turned out there was an older gentleman sitting next to me who had a long career
Mm-hmm.
and had made a lot of difficult career decisions, and he had clearly been successful. And he saw that I was reading this book, and we struck up a conversation. And I opened up to him about my very difficult decision about whether I should
Mm-hmm.
join Capital One. And he didn't say you must join Capital One, but he did convince me to make that move. After learning, he just knew the questions to ask, and
Mm-hmm.
he convinced me that it was worth the risk. And there are
Mm-hmm.
some points in your life where you got to take the leap. And I don't remember his name, and I wouldn't even recognize him if I saw him on the street. But like, that's what I mean by that was not a coincidence. It was the perfect timing. And someone sent us both to that pool in the Caribbean so he could help me out.
Yeah. Wow. That's so cool. Like, I mean, what question did you ask? Did he ask?
I don't even remember. It was so many years ago. He probably asked me questions about why not. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is it what are you afraid of? And I was probably like,
Oh,
oh,
that's
I don't
deep.
know, moving all the way to Tennessee is like, he's like, you're going to look back on that as an experience, and it won't, you know, if anything, it'll be a good thing. You'll gain new perspective. You'll meet new
Mm-hmm.
people. And guess what? I did. I lived in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I had the greatest time. I learned a ton.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Capital One was one of the accelerants in my career. So he forced me just to think outside my comfort zone more than anything.
What were you doing in your late 20s? I'm just out of curiosity because I'm in my late 20s, and whenever I feel like, oh my God, I'm so old because I saw these like 18 years old VC people like showing up in the industry. But on the other hand, I also feel like people with successful careers tend to have many, many different experiences when they're younger. So I definitely want to see from your perspective, like, what the hell am I doing? So yeah, I want to compare notes that way. So
Well, okay. So let me just be totally honest with you. You're looking at like all those 18-year-olds doing all this crazy stuff. I'm looking at you in your late 20s, with an awesome podcast and everything going for you. And I'm like, God, I didn't have my shit together in my late 20s. I
but
mean,
you do now, so I'm
yeah,
learning from
but
you.
yeah, but there are people in their 50s that are looking at me going, "Wow, like how is that guy doing this at such a young age?" I definitely found early success in my career. I chose a weird path, but I was always in leadership positions, pretty much right out of college, and I never looked back. It was just something I enjoy and embraced, and I do. My late 20s, I met my wife, and so I set out on that
Mhm,
journey. And soon after that, we got married and had kids. And I was part of the dot-com boom in my 20s when I graduated college out here in San Francisco, when South of Market was nothing but a bunch of empty warehouses. And
mhm. Yeah.
it was a different scene. And then I watched that get built, and then it got completely torn down. And then in my mid to late 20s, I moved back to the East Coast, and I focused on building a family.
Mhm,
And also in my career, I started working at, some larger companies and establishing myself and really learning skills that I really needed to learn. I needed some more foundational marketing capabilities, and I just hadn't had the experiences that I needed. So I put myself into different situations that were kind of uncomfortable sometimes. I am a big believer in, just getting thrown into the fire. It happened to me. I survived. I've got some burns, but those burns make me stronger and smarter and be able to anticipate things. And, people might sometimes hate me for doing it to them, but it makes them stronger. And I know that at some point it will pay back.
mhm.
Um, so I can't remember what I was doing in my late 20s, but I know I was getting married, having my first kid, and I was getting my first senior leadership roles in my early 30s. CoStar Group was the first one, and that was really the thing that trained me the most, not only in marketing but in leadership.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, curious about like what do you look for in a role when you're trying to maximize your career growth?
I look for problems that I think I can solve. both personally, but also where marketing can play a strategic and not just a supporting role.
Mhm.
And that's a trap, I think, for a lot of marketers is marketing can play second fiddle. Unless the company's founded by marketing, it most often is second fiddle to either product engineering
Mhm.
or to sales. And I think that I look for places where there's that white space to fill in, like I was talking about earlier,
Mhm.
and an openness to exploring new ideas and opportunities. Um, you know, a personal example was my decision to join CoStar Group that I was just talking about, which was probably my biggest career accelerator. I was a digital marketer
Mhm.
by trade, and I was looking for a way to become more of a marketing GM. I remember I had a
Mhm.
boss before that. He was a COO of a a fintech company that I was at earlier in my career. And I remember I was running digital marketing there, and I was really good at like Google and affiliate marketing and email marketing. And I was on top of the world. And I was like, I am the
Mhm.
best digital marketer. Back then we called it interactive marketing, but it was a
Mhm.
new space. And he looked at me and he's like, man, you're a smart guy, but how are you ever gonna like become the person that's actually leading all of marketing? And I was like, well, I hadn't really thought of that. I said, I suppose at some point digital marketing will become the thing,
Mhm.
and I'm just in the right field. And it, turned out that was true, but it really did make me think about like, I need to put myself in a situation to get the maximum amount of leverage from the skills that I have as a digital marketer.
Mhm.
And so I joined CoStar Group, which was a company that I saw a lot of promise for just digital and e-commerce in general. They were a very old school commercial real estate data company, still around, doing very well. Um, and I remember in my first year, I signed up to manage a really, really strategic project that I had no business in signing up for. But I
Mhm.
was good at digital marketing, and it was an e-commerce product. And I was like, I'll GM this product. And it took off. And I had no idea what I was doing, but it showed that I was willing to take risks, and I had some strengths in thinking about white space, but also adding some frameworks to it.
Mhm.
And when my boss left after a year, I became the CMO, head of marketing,
Mhm.
in my early 30s. And that was a huge maximizer to your question for my career growth. I put myself out there. I found leverage in a skill set that I had that I knew I was better at than anybody at the company. And I did not house of cards my boss out. That was more happy coincidence that he decided to leave. But I put myself in a situation where I got called out from the bullpen to
Mhm.
take the reins because I had shown that I could operate at that level.
Mhm.
That was a really good way to maximize my opportunity.
I feel like you mentioned a really great point at like, how do you transition from someone who is good at like a particular subject into a leader, right? So you mentioned, so first of all, you got to be good at something like in your early career, like in like a more junior level, you have to be really like honed down your craft, like what you pick, maybe digital marketing. So that's like your specialties that you've done like better than anyone else. And then in the middle, you pick like a white space, something that no one has done before. Maybe like no one see real estate could be marketing in like a digital marketing way. And then you like double down on marketing a particular product that sort of like demonstrate that you're like the mini CMO of that product. And then like you kind of like wait for the opportunity, or like maybe I guess like just get an opportunity to like see if you could manage the whole company that way because of you manage a good product. I feel like that's such a great like I guess like transition or like track record building. And I guess that you already answered my next question, but like I think this is like such a great like very clear concept. Curious about in terms of skill set, like what were you intentionally trying to build when you're trying to transition from the digital marketer to like a CMO?
I definitely needed to learn product marketing. I didn't really know what that was. When you're a digital marketer, you tend
Mhm.
to, at least for me, I was focused on the customer acquisition, the mechanics of customer acquisition,
Mhm.
both in terms of like the channels that I was buying, and getting click rates, and then also the conversion rate optimization on
Mhm.
landing pages and websites, and just that full kind of digital funnel. But I didn't, and I was good at like words, but I didn't really understand how to map, messaging hierarchy to different customer segments, and
Mhm.
embracing, more of a like, I don't know, customer centric perspective on how to position a company. And I didn't understand the frameworks for doing that. I think it all,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, when I advise companies, a lot of it just comes down to, okay, here's a framework. And
Mhm.
if you have this framework, you could just fill in the blanks. And with product marketing, that's especially true. You inherently know this stuff, but it's
Mhm.
hard to express sometimes. And it's therefore very difficult to apply at scale. And
Mhm.
so I had to learn how to be a better product marketer and how to really analyze customers and apply that in a way that I could not just on the surface improve conversion rates of stuff, but to
Mhm.
build products that actually met the needs of customers and spoke about it in a way that make them want to try us out. And that for me, that was a big transition to B2B marketing. It just
Mhm.
That's what B2B marketing is. And consumer marketing, you can get away with, I think, just more surface level messages, and sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. You cannot get away with it in B2B.
Mhm.
um, when I transitioned at CoStar Group, we were a publicly traded company, so I also had to learn like how to talk to different stakeholders,
Mhm.
not just our customers, but analysts on Wall Street. I was,
Mhm.
writing all of a sudden writing earnings reports and setting guidance for the street and doing road shows. Um, I had to learn how to do a lot of internal messaging.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, I was at a company with thousands of people, and I owned internal communications too. So we had to learn what would inspire and motivate employees around a message.
Mhm.
I had to learn about how to inspire the press. I had a PR team.
Mhm.
And these are all like slightly different messages of a core principled set of messages. And I never knew how to do that. These were so new. And I learned by reading, I learned by talking to other people, but mostly I learned by being asked for something and stressing out and racking my brain and sweating and crying a little bit. And then I did it wrong, and then I got it better. And I fortunately was given a chance. And, I lasted for 3 years at CoStar before I voluntarily made the decision to leave. But in that 3-year period, I learned so much. I never got my MBA, but that was my
MBA.
MBA. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like one of the core things between, in my personal opinion, like one of the core things between like CMO and a digital marketer, or like someone who's like like mastering a particular set of marketing, is um, sort of like you have to recognize like what does a company look for in their next quarter or like the next year goal, right? So to make the decision to like, I guess like set up KPI for your department, at let's say like the first day at your work as the CMO of a company, how do you figure out like what should you achieve in the next quarter, and then how do you sort of like figure out what's like the top problem that you need to solve?
Yeah. I mean, I think it really, for me, it's like start with the top. What's the company's objectives? What like you need some crisp objectives. That's hard for early stage startups. They're not always crisp. You know,
Mhm.
this definitely becomes easier when you're at a little bit more of an established company
Mhm.
and you have a couple years of historical baseline data behind you, and you know what kind of incremental improvement you want to see in the next year, or what's the
Mhm.
big thing you want to do. My process is start there, and and then say, okay, what could marketing contribute to that in a measurable way? What could we drive? What could we influence? And what do we need to support? And then I say, okay, well, like let's pick some stretch goals. It could
Mhm.
be like, a performance marketing, customer acquisition stuff. It could be product marketing, retention or LTV stuff. It could be, just a channel like email marketing. I need to get this many clicks in order to achieve this, or demand gen. And then I go through a process where I say, do we have what it takes to hit those goals?
Mm-hmm.
What skills do we have where I'm confident, and what skills are we lacking that I need to hire for or make up for? And then I go through a process where I say, I feel confident. Let's go red, yellow, green. Green is I'm super confident we can hit that. Yellow is I don't think we're going to get there. And red is there's just no way. Like, unless we invest in this, we don't have the people, we don't have the skills, and we got to make investments soon. And let's put that down as a dependency in our path to actually getting there. And then it becomes fairly scientific. I mean, it's a lot of squishy math, but you can start to make sense of like, do I have the tools in place? If not, are we willing to invest? If not, I can then have an honest conversation with the CEO, with the board, with the CFO about what we can sign up for realistically. Now, that's a really good process at a big company and even a mid-sized company. At an early stage company, you got to kind of play it more as you go. You lay things out for the year, but then you have to adjust every month. It gets a little bit harder, but you have more utility players. So you would hopefully have a few people on the team that could adapt and move to different things and multitask. But like, you just have to be honest with yourself about what you can do and what your team can do, and about the budget that you have, and then apply it to the goals, and just be honest, because you will have a far better experience if you're honest up front than if you try to overpromise and underdeliver.
So for example, let's say if you're marketing for like let's say a podcast or something. If you're marketing this podcast, how would you find your target audience, and like what would be your KPI for like if you're
Yeah.
like the marketing person for this?
I would probably look at other podcasts that you look at and go, wow, they've really done something here. Maybe they've been around for, and probably don't go too big. I mean, don't look at like,
Joe Rogan.
masters of scale or how I
Yeah.
built this. I mean, those have like crazy subscribers. Or look at that aspirationally and say, I'm going to put that on as my North Star, or beat them. I'm going to beat them as my North Star, right? And put that on the board, and then come up with a more realistic marker or set of markers on the way. Maybe it's like, in 3 years, I want to be here. In 2 years, I want to be here. And by next year, I want to be here. Or by end of year, I want to be here. And baseline it. How many subscribers do you have today? How many downloads? How many listeners? Whatever. It's hard to get podcast stats, I know, because we struggle with that. But like, set yourself, what's your number one KPI? Maybe it's listeners or subscribers, whatever you can get. And then say, okay, I need to get 100% lift in that metric in the next 12 months. What are the things that I need to do in order to achieve that? Well, I need to publish this many episodes. It needs to be of this quality. I need, this many shares per listener in order to get that. So you need some virality that you expect. And I need whatever. I need like 5 guests that are major influencers, that whatever. Like, you just have a set of like things that you need to do that you believe in your heart of hearts will get you to that 1-year mission. It's just get to that next step. Because you've already convinced yourself you're going to get to that North Star if you just get to each milestone. Don't worry about that big North Star. You'll get there. You have very little control over whether or not you beat everybody else. You have a lot of control over the things that will get you to that first milestone. So focus on that, and then execute like heck against those 3 or 4 things. And as the marketer, I would take on, the things that I think that I can achieve the most. I would, take on, positioning this podcast as the one you have to listen to. And I would get my social strategy like up to snuff, and I would get as many followers as I can. And I'd get on Clubhouse and start a room and moderate sessions about it. I don't know. You'd come up with all the tactics that would align to the very specific marketing goals. And it just becomes this very stacked, orderly way of achieving your goals.
I feel like that kind of speaks to like one thing in marketing. I feel like it's really challenging is the result could be really vague, right? So like, for example, for sales, they could hit like this goals or whatever. But like for marketing, although there's like social following goals that you could achieve, for example, this amount of follower by this time, but like how will the follower actually transfer into like customers, right? So like I feel like those are also like the conversion rate or the retention rate are also super hard to measure. Just out of curiosity on like how do you
Mhm.
prioritize on that, or like how do you kind of like test out these like unmeasurable factors?
So in other words, how do you connect the dots between things that aren't as measurable with the ultimate success of an initiative, basically, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think that it's not easy. I mean, the reality with goal setting and measurement is that sometimes we're in like sole control of hitting goals, though that's pretty rare, honestly. I don't have many examples of these. Sometimes you're in the driver's seat and you have close collaborators who are really necessary and are major dependencies. Like think about marketing depending on engineering to do something. And
Mhm.
this is most often the case. Examples at Yelp are like performance marketing or lifecycle marketing or very direct channels.
Mhm.
And other times we're influencers or supporters of someone else's work. And this is really hard, just harder to measure because we may not be the accountable party. So we need to figure out what marketing is responsible for and how we can hold ourselves accountable for our piece of the puzzle. And that's the hardest part about measurement and demonstrating success when it's a level below the surface. Um, the success or failure is measured in different ways. Examples are like, merchandising strategy or product marketing or messaging or copywriting. Like, how do you isolate those factors when it's one element of a major company initiative? What I tend to do is I pick like call it like low level metrics as I can that would be proxies for whether or not the things that we're doing are are the things that would contribute to success. It's not so much a top down like were we successful? Okay, now let's break them down. It's more of a bottoms up like let's make sure we have an integrated approach to any of these really big kind of ideas, whether it's brand or a product launch or whatever. And now what is each team signing up for? And how do we all hold ourselves accountable for the top level goal, but what are we each signed up for at like one layer down? So for instance, if the goal is to sell $10 million of a certain product, right? Marketing may have responsibility for the pricing strategy. It might have responsibility for the messaging of that product in
Mhm.
in all different channels, and it might have responsibility for the marketing channels that we market this stuff, but we're not responsible for the product itself. So we're going to sign up for you know what's the velocity of customer acquisition and what's our cost per acquisition. In merchandising and pricing, we're going to measure what's our average contract value or what's the average sale price, or we're going to measure profit margin. How well are we acquiring customers? What's our CAC to LTV ratio is the one that we use internally. So how
Mhm.
much are we spending versus how much are we making, and can we make sense of that? So I think it's just breaking down the challenge and the bigger company goal into little bits and pieces that we can control.
Mhm.
And when you add it up, it works itself out, but everybody has to be accountable for something.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree that I guess like the bottom up approach. And like I'm curious about like you've worked at so many different companies that they sell different products. Um Curious, what have you learned in on this journey, and then like is it like are they all super different, or are they like essentially the same, no matter if it's like marketing or like actually leading the company? Eventbrite and Yelp are very different. And then this moment, like Ron's, like these are all like very different companies marketing different products.
Yeah, I would say I literally learned an important lesson at every stop on the journey. some things are just reinforced over and over again, and hopefully I don't make the same mistakes more than 8 times. But I learn an important lesson at every stop. For me, it's less about the industry. As you can see, I've jumped around to a lot of different industries. I find that fascinating. It's more about the business model, the customers, and then the stage of the product market fit. So taking you maybe through a few of those, at Grand Rounds, which is a great healthcare company doing great things for the world, I learned that I love a mission-driven business. It just, it makes it all worth it. It makes solving the problems that much more meaningful, and it adds a sense of urgency. But what I also learned is that I don't really want to be head of marketing at a company that only focuses on closing big deals, because I felt like I didn't have a lot of accountability for the things that mattered most to the company. It was usually fell on the shoulders of a really good salesperson. And it just, I never felt great about that. I never had a great sense of self-satisfaction. So I promised myself after Grand Rounds, I would never go to another company that only succeeded based on the efforts of a small number of salespeople. At this moment, I learned that I love being a marketer who gets to market to other marketers. We were a content marketing platform, and I got to be the customer. I got to go out and talk very honestly about how much it's the way Salesforce markets themselves. They are the best user. They eat their own dog food. They are the biggest proponents. You see how successful they are, and then they say it's because we use Salesforce so well. And it's impossible to not want to use Salesforce at that point. So I loved being the expert on day one at, the value prop at this moment. But what I learned the hard way is that we really lacked product market fit. We were far too services heavy, so it was really difficult to scale. At Eventbrite, I really found my groove for two-sided marketplaces and self-serve acquisition models. I went from supporting just big deals at Grand Rounds to a place where, 65, 70% of the new customers came in through the website, which marketing owned. And so all of a sudden I had a number, and I could use all the growth hacking and growth marketing skills that I had developed as a consumer marketer for a long time. But I also learned some hard lessons there. I had teams in 8 different countries. And there are some real challenges with that, not just the practicality of trying to do an all hands meeting with a team in Melbourne, Australia at the same time as someone in Mendoza, Argentina, which is practically impossible because of time zones, language barriers, but also you're literally running 8 different businesses with very different challenges in every single country. And that was just really hard. I would do it again, but I would do it differently. And now at Yelp, where I've been for 2.5 years and really loving it, it's confirmed my love for marketplaces, and we're operating on both sides. And it's just fun being able to operate across 2 different audiences, consumers and businesses, but also finding really interesting methods to address both together. But, I'm experiencing new challenges. Yelp is an amazing consumer brand, but we've got a bit of a fractious relationship with small business owners. And I'm dealing with, how to manage through a difficult reputation and the implications that has for how far a marketing dollar can go when your LTVs are cut short. So I am literally learning something at every company I go to, and I guarantee you I will continue to learn something new at every company until I hang up my shoes. And that's what makes it so fun,
Yeah, I feel like I really like your honesty about like the challenges each different companies are facing. And like, I feel like that's totally real. And I've got career advice from like many different people. Some people suggest that like go to a place that's like, for example, let's say if I'm a marketing person, go to a place that's like really prioritize on marketing, as well as like they already have a good reputation, or they already have a good set of like things that like you could build your track record on. But I also got other advice about like, go to where you can solve their problem. Like, and I feel like it's so interesting to hear. I think like from your answer, it's kind of both, right? Like, so to pick the right company as well as like also, kind of like there's different challenges in each step that you could just like use as a learning journey. And I feel like it's just like a very, very well-rounded, I guess, like thought process, like when you considering each companies in the past. I check out your LinkedIn profile. It's like super perfectly done. Like everything is like translating into the business language. And I feel like a lot of us, like, when we first started our career, like we don't really know how to kind of communicate what we have done in each step of the way. So curious, is there any general like maybe tools or like things that we could have like learn to be better at like communicating what we have achieved in our jobs?
Yeah. So I think you said it well. I think, first of all, present yourself as results driven. That's really it. That's the primary filter. When I'm looking for people to join my team, and when I talk to others who I admire, it's just be results driven. Use numbers, but don't just use the numbers. Tell everyone how what you did contributed to the success of the bigger company goals. It was just like I talked about how you set KPIs. Make the connection for people about how what you drove business results, and make sense of it for people, because otherwise they won't understand. And if you want to take it a step further, tell people about the challenges that you encountered along the way and how you overcame them. That is rare on LinkedIn. And it's perhaps the biggest weakness of LinkedIn. Honestly, it's all gloss. It's all gloss. But that's the stuff that shows what someone is really made of, right? Like, tell me about how you took a difficult situation and you made it better. Tell me about a personal challenge you had along the way and what you learned to overcome that. I'm personally not doing that very well, honestly, but I am telling a story about my career development. And each part of the journey is another way for a recruiter or a potential partner to see the value in connecting with me, right? So like, give people moments and opportunities. Don't make it repetitive. If you've done the same thing at every company, whether it's 2 companies or 5 companies, find a different way to tell that story, because you never know how someone's going to connect with you. If it's just numbers and numbers and numbers and numbers, guess what someone's going to think of you? They're going to think you're a quant, and that's a good role for a company to have. It's not necessarily the leadership role. It's not necessarily the role that's going to open up all the possibilities. So in addition to the quantitative stuff, talk about what it meant and talk about what you accomplished for the company, in a more strategic way.
That's super well said. I feel like especially when you're looking for like leadership roles, like it's good to show that your EQ in some way on all the resumes. You're currently on the board of some startups and some other companies. Just curious about that experience in general. Like, what is being a board means to you, and what are some common things that they've done that's good, and like what do you see as like their mistakes in general, like
Yeah.
as a startups?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I love working with younger startups. Doesn't necessarily mean younger founders. Honestly, it doesn't matter the age. It's more just the age of the company itself and where they are on their path. But I love it. I really do. It's also my chance to like work at bigger companies and have a little bit of a different risk profile than working with younger companies, where I get to appreciate some of the challenges. Frankly, there's no one lesson. Every startup is different and has a different path. And I know that's the worst answer, but it really, for me, it comes down to the strengths of the founders and the teams, and where they have strengths and where they have gaps. And what I've learned more than anything else is that a big strength in any one area can really catapult one startup to success and really outperform the competition in ways that I hadn't anticipated. And I need to adapt my guidance and where I lean in based on that. For instance, I have, I advise a number of startups, but I'm thinking about 2 in particular that are very different. One is a bootstrapped, highly technical company in the Salesforce App Exchange ecosystem. And they've got the technical stuff in spades, but they don't really embrace brand, and they don't understand how to appear bigger. than they actually are, so they can compete with some very well-established players in the space. And so I have helped them a lot on that. I mean, whether, literally logo development that we got done through 99 Designs, it's great. Or, building a killer website, getting a social presence, thought leadership content, newsletters, just the things that establish you as a brand. And that's catapulted them. They've got the technical stuff done. On the other side, I'm working with another startup that's in the fintech space, and they are amazing at brand. The founder is a visionary, and he can weave a story together and convince the CEO of a Fortune 200 to buy whatever he's selling them. But I think technically they need a lot of help in like the frameworks to figure out who their customers are and technically how they serve their needs, and how to describe that in a way where it makes sense to them, because they're not a technical buyer. So it really, you can't apply one playbook to any one company. You just have to recognize the strengths of a founder and their teams, and then you have to fill in the gaps. And there's gonna be gaps. You just have to work with founders that can acknowledge that and are willing to work on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So like we're at the last part of the interview, which is like 1 minute fire round for you. So first question is, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book, oh boy. My favorite book is probably pretty much any Hemingway book. I used to be a huge fan because I traveled a lot throughout Spain and France, and Sun Also Rises, I was literally reading it when I was in Pamplona, and he was talking about his experience there and running with the bulls, and waking up to the sunrise in San Sebastian. And I was literally on the beach in San Sebastian drinking wine at sunset, reading that. And I'd say that one's probably, it affected me emotionally the most in my life.
Nice. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
My wife, she challenges me, but she's also my voice of reason.
Oh, that's sweet. Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party? Wow. I assume you mean like celebrities or other people that I don't know personally, or can it be like my family?
All of them. It's your party.
All of them. Yeah. I mean, oh boy. I mean, I'd love to have like Dave Grohl there, so he could like, give us a little bit of a performance after we're done eating. Probably Bobby Flay, so he could actually cook the food. But I think he's great. I know he's a little bit of a showboat, but I just think it's hilarious. Beat Bobby Flay is such a good show. And then I would say probably like, I don't know, like Malcolm Gladwell, because I think that he would just like throw out really interesting ways of looking at the world and create just amazing conversation. And then my family too, because that would be fun.
Yeah, for sure. So where can we find you outside of work?
You can find me on Mount Tam mountain biking. I live up in Marin County. You could find me at Squaw Valley skiing. You could find me binge watching something on any number of streaming services that I now have adopted throughout this pandemic. Or you could find me, I have 2 dogs, so playing with my 2 pups at some park or beach.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much. Good luck with everything. Can't wait to see how far you go with this.